A few thousand words into a script about Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, the sheer magnitude of the project began to dawn on me. Nothing was tying together the way I wanted it to, and the opening was way too long and pretentious. Hopefully this one isn't. I've taken some more time, picked some of the gold nuggets out of that shit pile, and this is the shorter letter. The reason why it's so difficult to talk about Dragon's Dogma is quite simply that there is a lot to talk about. This video game contains more video game than just about any other video game. It is an open world, but also leans into tight, Souls-esque environmental storytelling, especially when it comes to the dungeons and the choke points connecting the big areas. The story, especially when it comes to side quests, can often seem shallow, old-fashioned, or meaningless, but in many cases your actions and decisions do make their consequences felt, and the conclusion of the Arisen's Odyssey ultimately and profoundly contemplates the question of immortality. Dragon's Dogma has the combat of a character action game, and with 9 vocations and many weapon-specific abilities to choose from, many ways to experience that combat. The bow mechanics in particular are far more satisfying than those offered by either FromSoft or Bethesda. There is also enemy climbing and grappling, and quite a variety of enemies to climb or grapple. And there is more. Dragon's Dogma is an online game, but also completely and unapologetically single-player. The game makes a habit of throwing information at you, often through your pawns, but hell will freeze over before it tells you that it's doing the stat allocation for you, or what the automatic stat allocations are for each class, or that for Caxton to sell you the good stuff you have to give him a gold idol, or that the only way to get a gold idol is to do Fornival's dirty laundry and then not only escort his stuck-up daughter around town, but do so perfectly without bumping into her or taking too long to fetch her a flask of water. I didn't even know half the quest lines existed until I tried getting the hero achievement. It's a bit like Dark Souls in that way, but not in others. There is a minimap, which I recommend turning off, as well as quest markers and even big dumb question marks over the heads of quest NPCs, but the bulk of your interaction with the world still occurs at the diegetic level. You have to keep an eye out for green warish by the side of the road because, while chests and lootable items do have a sort of glowiness about them, no part of the UI will acknowledge their presence until you are standing right on top of them. In this way, the world gives you as much information as the UI. Ore veins change their appearance to inform you of their depletion. Notice boards have actual sheets of paper on them if there are quests available. Your character's running animation subtly changes when you're about to run out of stamina. On the subject of running, there is no horse in Dragon's Dogma. The world is actually too dense for one. There are, however, certain abilities that can provide movement speed buffs, and the fast travel system allows you to place port crystals wherever you want. And despite all of it, despite the dizzying feature richness and all the seemingly contradictory elements, Dragon's Dogma somehow manages not to tear itself to pieces. Somehow, unlike my dearly departed first draft, everything fits itself together to form one of the most memorable and most intimidating worlds I have ever been confronted with. Confronting, daunting, intimidating, these are important words to keep in mind. Some video game worlds inspire wonder and fascination. Others command awe and respect. Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen's world, however, excels at instilling a sense of intimidation. Once outside the walls of Gran Soren or Casardis, and particularly in the dark of night, all of the monsters make sure that you know they're here to kill you. The very stones oppose your movements in the confined mountain passes. But they also make a habit of lurking just outside the ring of lantern light, taunting you with their glowing eyes, informing you that the darkness is theirs, that you are trespassing, and that your lantern oil will not last forever. Light is the quintessential example of how mechanics don't have to be based on contrived bullshit. They can, instead, be grounded in something diegetic, something simple, and something real. During the darkest hours of the night, or in the deepest depths of the dungeons, the lantern light is your bastion, your safe space, your circle of protection. It can cause a great deal of anxiety, then, to know that the lantern can run out of fuel or be doused by water. I often find the anxiety surrounding survival mechanics to be overwhelming and unappetizing, but that is usually because there are 18 different meters to keep track of. At least it feels like 18. However, if the anxiety is condensed down into just one system, like the oxygen in Astroneer or the food in Valheim, all of a sudden it stops being a chore and starts to mean something. Especially when, as is the case in Dragon's Dogma, the system is only active some of the time. When the sun is out, you're safe and you don't have to worry about your oil supply. But when it's time to venture into the darkness, you actually have to ask yourself if you're prepared. Even if it is easy to manage and the lantern does not fizzle out very often, the knowledge of that possibility in the corner of your mind serves an amazingly subtle and powerful narrative purpose. It solidifies the impression that these spaces are not meant for humans. The darkness is hostile and inhospitable and will do anything it can to snuff out your light. Of course, this world's intimidation only lasts until you've learned the secrets it holds and gained enough power to turn most enemies into a joke, but in Dragon's Dogma that power creep is actually, astonishingly, a case of ludonarrative consonance. When you're in the process of turning into a literal god, it makes sense to also become a metaphorical one. And it is not the destination of godhood, but the journey. From rags to riches, from impotence to omnipotence, from wet noodles to M20 APIT. That journey is what has compelled me, time and time again, to return and push forward once more into the forbidding darkness. And I mean literally push forward. Between this game and the Souls series, I've inflicted forward drift on a lot of left analog sticks. And that's almost poetic in its own sad, materialistic way. Elden Ring is, so far, the closest thing we've had to another Dragon's Dogma, but I think neither the apple nor the orange gets the better of that comparison. While Elden Ring inarguably leads the industry in terms of melee combat, enemy design, and world design, it lacks enemy climbing, and both its bow mechanics and its lantern are still letdowns compared to Dragon's Dogma. There is a trailer out there for a game called Crimson Desert that seems to promise as much or even more video game than Dragon's Dogma contains, but it's only a trailer. Of course, the question hanging over all of this is the very real and very imminent release of Dragon's Dogma 2. And that game doesn't have to do much. I mean, obviously, bringing the graphics and combat up to speed and making what will probably be a bigger world with more enemy variety is a lot of development work. Not to mention coming up with a story that somehow coexists with the original one. But from the player's perspective, there is not much that can be done to improve the basic formula of the gameplay loop. Some quality of life stuff maybe, but that's it. A little more useful information and a lot less useless chatter. Respecking would obviously be nice, but I don't even know what that would mean with progression systems this convoluted. Maybe the progression systems could be a little less convoluted. As far as the inventory systems are concerned, we could bring things up to the standard introduced by The Witcher 3 8 years ago. Catch the fuck up, Bethesda, these games aren't about backpacking, of having crafting materials and other unimportant items that weigh nothing. I would also like to see enemies that are immune to non-magical attacks done away with because, as you might have detected by now, I prefer a power fantasy that is grounded in physics, but that is just personal preference. The point is that the only way Dragon's Dogma 2 can be better is incrementally, the same way Elden Ring is better than Dark Souls. It can be a lot bigger, it can have even more video game in it, but there is a lot less room for it to be better than there is room for it to be worse. I've avoided watching any of the trailers, but my primary hope is that if they change anything, it won't be the lantern.